All right, well, I think that this is our quorum then, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 12 o'clock. So if we could have a roll call.
Mr. Egan?
I'm here.
Mr. Jeff Dot?
Here.
Mr. Becker?
Here.
Ms. Goodman? Mr.
I'm
Adam
here,
Dot?
but not participating.
Location?
I am at Central Wellness in Manistee.
What's the number at Golczewski Drive?
Mr. Adam Dot?
Here.
And Ms. Kaminsky?
I'm sorry, I was muted. I said 310 Golczewski Drive. I didn't know if you
Okay,
got that.
thank you.
Got it, thanks. Okay, is that it? All right, do I have an approval for the agenda?
I'd make a motion to approve it.
My question is, do we want to have, the ability to make any decision today in regard to the, contracts that were forwarded on the bids?
Rather than set up a separate meeting?
Oh, yeah.
It is on the agenda under old business, here in the election process, so.
Okay, that'll work.
Okay.
I'll support that.
All in favor of approving the agenda? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good deal. Anybody online for public comment?
Is there a public comment at the end? Let me see what's on the agenda here. I have some comments about what was sent to us, but if I can hold them at the end as a public comment, would that be okay? Yes, no?
First try.
Welcome. So when did you start at the county?
Well, I've been with the county almost 19 years,
Mhm.
so, and then I just.
And this is a new position then?
Yep, I started the last Monday.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, glad to have you here. Thanks for,
She's taken minutes for a lot of years.
nice, nice. Well, we just hadn't crossed paths.
No.
I guess I just hadn't had an issue with the county or something, so.
That doesn't drop out again, I think we're all.
All right, good deal. All right, so we have a transition committee set, Jeff, Mike, and Adam. We'll start that. And, we'll get a meeting together in either April or May, try and get a few things hammered out on that. But that's it as far as the committees this time around. And Barry, that takes you to your report. I hate to just plop you right into it after all you're having to do, but.
Fine. So, no action or incidents to report since last month. Between the last meeting and this meeting, at the end of February, I was down in Lansing for the State Airport Conference, the 21st and 22nd of February. Just a couple topics that came out of that day and a half down there is the overall theme of the conference was sustainability, and they kind of stretched that to apply to things, but I think that's kind of coming down from the governor's office as to some of the themes throughout the state this year. There was one good session on the FAA reauthorization that I had talked with the board about in our January 29th special meeting, a little bit of overview on that. The Senate Transportation Committee finally has passed an FAA reauthorization bill, but the Senate has not yet taken that up, so it's just kind of come out of committee. Typically, the process should be that the Senate passes a bill, and then that then goes into conference committee between the House and Senate to rectify the two different bills. There was some discussion that they may skip a lot of that and just start with trying to compromise with the committee bill and the House passed version from last year. There was some thought that maybe that was going to happen quickly because of the deadline around the government shutdown that just passed, but because they passed continuing resolutions to kind of move things forward, this is now still out there. So I don't know when and if that will get addressed this year. But there has been some movement. There was a session on asset management planning, which was interesting, and there are some templates that I will be incorporating and adopting and trying to pick up on some of the best practices that came out of that session. And then, as has been the case for years now, PFAS was a topic, and some of the progress that the board may not be aware of is that there are now 2 approved alternative products that have been put on the market. There are still issues because there is no approved way of transitioning from the old product to the new product. So airports that are starting to adopt the new product, they are only doing it through purchasing new wire equipment and then putting the new product in that, because there's no approved way by the state or the EPA as to how and if you can clean out an existing vehicle and remove all of the residue that is there. So there are a couple companies out there that will charge a fee of $100,000 per vehicle to clean them, but there is no approved way or no authority that's in charge will say that whether or not that is good enough.
Oh.
So all of us airports that aren't ordering new equipment are basically on hold.
Hmm.
The other issue is that these products that are coming out and are being approved are not interchangeable. You have to adopt one and stick with it forever.
Mhm.
So there's talk at the state level of trying to adopt a standard for the state of Michigan, so that at least airports within the state would all be using the same product, so we could share product and or share, other things. But that whole area is still years away from really being fully resolved, but progress is being made. So then, moving on to my second slide is employments for February. Were very good, up significantly from a year ago, and that's the highest number since, I believe, 1960, well, other than 2012, Frontier. 623 is the highest since 1969. It's higher, it's significantly higher than any number in the last decade that I've been tracking. And from a on-time performance, there was just one canceled flight in February. And actually, right now, we're in the last roughly 8 weeks, there's basically only been one canceled flight. So over a period of about 2 months, one canceled flight, and very few delays, all helped significantly by the mild winter so far. On airfares, here we see that fares haven't changed much over the last month as compared to the month before. The averages kind of align with where they've been, with Grand Rapids being least expensive, Traverse City being slightly more expensive, we being third, and then Muskegon being the most expensive airport in the region. Fares can be found at any of those airports that happen to be lowest, typical for airline pricing. So no real movements there. And I did update, actually, because the second part of this includes parking, and I don't always, every month, go out and check what the parking rates are at various airports, because they don't change that often, but they have changed since the last time I checked. So Traverse City and Grand Rapids have both increased their parking rates. Traverse City is now $12 a day, and Grand Rapids is a range of $14 to $25 a day, depending on which box you are using. Their new parking structure is $25. Their walkable outdoor parking is $17, and then the remote access lot is $14.
Parking is included in these numbers or excluded?
In the lower half, they are included. That's why we become the best priced airport.
And how many days of parking did you?
It's a week, so fares plus 7 days parking. So it's just a metric of other costs that, going to a different airport, you might incur. Other metrics that could be included would be travel time, travel costs, drive, hour either way, but there's a lot of different things. This is just one example to show that even though can be slightly more expensive sometimes, that can be offset by other factors. Any questions? Hearing none. On to capital projects. So, the CLT update that has been sitting on the state's desk for over a year, it has had some movement. It is now on the FAA's desk. It is in FAA airspace review. So, the update I got last week on that. And then the fiscal year 24 projects we have later on the agenda is the contract with Mead and Hunt for the design of these. That was on the agenda back in January and get into its status and where we are with that today when we get there. Had a meeting last week, actually it was the week before last, with both MDOT and the FAA. The FAA wanted a 30% plan review of the projects, kind of as a checkpoint of where things are. So we held that meeting. Eden Hunt were here, and FAA and MDOT were online for that. So those projects are moving forward. Eden Hunt had a surveyor out last week, follow up on that. And I had a separate meeting with Eden Hunt after the bigger meeting. The T-hanger doors and the crack sealing remarking projects are not part of the big project, and I wanted to make sure that we were moving forward on all the plan, all of the items on our capital plans this coming year. So we can touch base on that, and we are moving forward. Funding should be in place. It's the biggest one is these big items because we are relying on FAA discretionary funding, which is kind of like leftover money that goes to projects. We are on their plan, but until everything gets finalized, there's always some risk that that funding could get reallocated elsewhere. Part of the reason a 30% plan review is really unheard of. Usually 60% is where things start. But I think the FAA and MDOT want to make sure that everything's in place so that they're comfortable with that allocation of extra funding. So funding is identified for everything, yes. Is it locked in? There's always, until contracts are signed or grants are signed, there's always some concern on that front.
So is Meeden Hunt involved in all of these, the hangar doors, the beacon and everything?
Meeden Hunt will be involved in everything, and yes, they're
Yeah.
involved in everything, but the crack sealing remarking, that is actually a project that state manages itself.
Okay.
So Meeden Hunt kind of provides some of the inputs into it, quantities, but they're not actively overseeing that project. That's actually a state-run project.
Okay.
Have we always had input from engineering in regard to fixing doors on the T-hangers?
We haven't because it wasn't a federally funded project before, but now that it's federally funded, it goes through a completely different.
It wasn't ARPA funding that is supporting that?
But no, not for this.
No.
This is actually, it's actually the airport's ARPA funding, not county ARPA.
Okay.
So what's the timeline for that now? I mean, like hangar doors, beacon, that sort of thing. Do we have a general, I know we can't put a hard one on there, but
I'm confident that the crack sealing remarking will happen this year. The T-hanger doors, I'm, say, 80% confident will happen this year.
Okay.
The beacon, runway lighting, RSA safety area grading, that was actually a lot of the conversation at our 30% plan review meeting was timing of that. But the plan right now is to assume that it will happen this fall.
Okay.
Beacon, runway?
Beacon, runway lighting, and RSA grading,
Yeah.
Basically one big project. The concern will be, because right now, designs will be completed in April, bids will be due in May, and May is a little bit late in the bidding season. So there is some concern that either you will get bids that will be contingent on not doing it this year and doing it next spring as the first project as opposed to a last project, but we're moving forward with a goal of completing it this year. It will really depend on what contractor availability becomes to the stage of this. Any other questions? A little bit more details on the Cape Air service. So we already talked about February performance. So their passenger numbers were up 55% versus a year ago, and then this kind of shows our top Februaries in the airport's history. So 2012 was Frontier, 69 was North Central, and then 2024 is Cape Air, and 2017 was our previous carrier, Public Charters. So I see where they are in that
Mhm.
list.
What do you attribute that to, Barry? Was there a sale on tickets, any sort of reason why you think that's second best in our history?
I mean, it's a pattern that we've been seeing growing over the last year. So November, December saw significant increases. January did too. March, a year ago, March is an interesting month because it's the one month we did not have Frontier service for the full month. We only had it for like 10 days. So the comparables for March are weaker in that sense. So our number one March was Cape Air's March a year ago. This year, March, we're tracking to surpass that a little bit. So once Cape Air resolved their performance issues roughly a year ago, it was really February a year ago was their last really true poorly performed month, which is why the difference versus a year ago is plus 55%. We've seen basically steady improvement, and basically they've reestablished confidence in the market. Now there's a track record of reliable performance that goes back basically a year.
Mhm.
And at that record at 623, it is at what capacity? 80%, 90%, 70?
2 a day, 9 times,
It-
9 times 2 times 30.
It's hard to get too much, but February. Factor 68%. And roughly 78% or 80% is about as full as you can get, because in our peak summer, that's as high as we can get. So there's 15% more based on the current capacity. And then the last thing, looking forward to March on Cape Air. So performance looks good. I've already mentioned there's been no cancellations so far this month. March numbers look good, and this is true of both January and February. The number of bookings within the month have been very strong. So January and February were both up about 40% versus a year ago. And this morning, I actually had my monthly call with Cape Air and asked them about this. And this isn't something they're seeing in the rest of their system. In fact, they're seeing softer bookings in the rest of their system, but we are significantly improving our bookings. But at some point, if you're capacity constrained,
Mhm.
all we're doing is filling things up earlier than later, although obviously within February, we had capacity to grow, March, April, probably a little bit, but come into the summer, we don't have capacity to grow, so filling those planes up sooner. And that is my report.
Barry, do we know the percentages, but how many book direct with Cape Air as opposed to American or United
It's roughly 50-50.
of?
Of total bookings, roughly 50% book directly with Cape Air and 50% book with other airlines.
So
And
we don't know.
Of the other airlines, it's probably right now I'd say about 80% American, and then 15% United and 5% just random other things. If you look at the airfares, you'll see that American is generally the most competitive on price. And I attribute that to the fact that Cape Air has a code share with American, whereas United, it's just the interline. And if you extrapolate that, our fares are generally roughly $40 cheaper than Muskegon. And in Muskegon, their carrier only has an interline. And therefore, you're just adding the two fares together, and you don't get any benefit of American in a code share case of basically pricing the entire route at a price point that they think is what the market, deserves. So I think that's the reason we're seeing such a high uptake on the American side is price driven. And that price being due to the nature of having a code share versus just line, which is something to note as we look at proposals.
Anything else? All right. Let's move on then. Old, finished, unfinished business, the air carrier selection process. So here we are.
Then that, let me stop sharing. So typically our process has been that we invite bidders to present to the airport at a special meeting if it doesn't align with regular meetings. And given that our comment due date is 5 days before our next meeting, and it wouldn't have had time to schedule things for this meeting, that is kind of where we fall. So typically, we've held a special meeting, gave each carrier basically roughly an hour time frame to present and then for us to ask questions. I would recommend that we do that again. Obviously, the board can do other things. I was talking with Muskegon on Friday. Their situation is a little bit different. Their organization is different. They're actually going to do community forums and trying to reach the public and get public comments, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
We've typically left this board and our ability for the public to come in and make public comments.
Right.
But we haven't reached out beyond that.
Okay.
Well, I can understand that Muskegon with, that sizable population and the downward
Yeah.
spiral they've been on because of their proximity to Grand Rapids. I thoroughly understand that. How many bids did they get?
They got 7 bids.
Okay.
They got some interesting ones. They got a bid from Sun Country, 737s, but 1 flight a day, or actually no, 4 flights a week, so it's even less than 1 a day. But 2 of those a week being to Minneapolis and 2 being to generally either Florida or Nashville. Sun Country started in EAS probably about a year ago in La Crosse, Wisconsin with that model. This is the second time they've bid other airports for that model.
Well, so if we schedule another meeting then, first of all, I'm not gonna be here. So just everyone knows, I'm gonna be gone for about 3 weeks now. And I think that throws me right, just barely off of the edge of the table here.
I'm with you.
So, so that's 2 people who would not be available over the next 3 weeks, for something like that. So that leaves, well, it leaves 4 members.
What's the final day? Comment?
April 11th.
April 11th.
midnight, April 11th, so
Okay.
the 11th would still be a date we could.
I've been trying to find it on the comment thing, the docket. Is it loaded yet, or
Which,
for the proposals?
oh, for the comment period or
Yeah.
the proposal?
For just
For
an
the
average
comment,
person
yeah.
around
So,
town to send
the email
something in.
that we received has the date in it, and I
Yeah.
think that's the only place that is mentioned. I don't think they post that into the docket itself.
Well, I tried loading it, and all I come up with was stuff from 2019. I had the Sky West thing for Pendleton, Oregon, and a whole bunch of other stuff with that number, but I cannot find ours.
I can walk you through after
Yeah,
this.
maybe we'll have to see if I...
Well, where did-
That website is sometimes difficult to use, so.
I couldn't keep going on. They said the first of, one of 25, and then there's 313 on the page. I couldn't find any way to keep scrolling, so. Maybe
The key is proper searching.
Yeah,
So you narrow down to what you're looking for.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah, but the average person around town who wants to register a comment, would they have to go through that same
Obviously.
searching? Oh,
Well,
goodness.
if they don't know the system, they don't know the system.
Yeah, I put that number into the search.
That's why,
Damn the ignorant.
but also that's why our meetings are public, so this is
They
another
can-
forum.
They could
for
come
them
to the meeting, sure.
Come and
Yeah.
influence.
Well, we've got 3 bids on this, and to me, we're dealing with 2 9-seaters and a 30-seater.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's a minimum 30-seater, or is it 30 seats? I wasn't exactly clear on that.
Yeah,
The way, well, on paper,
it says,
Contour's bid looks really good.
mhm.
There's a lot, I think, that we need to dig into. Just that being one question. Another question being, if you look at some of the charts they have, the last year they have is 2018.
Right.
There's a reason that they've selectively chosen things.
Try to pick the best.
In some of my news feeds, I get random stuff, and there's a newspaper article from one of their cities which shows in January, they canceled 40% of their flights. So they are having operational issues right now. They've just received a 25% investment from SkyWest, which I'm surprised they didn't mention at all in their proposal. I'm curious as to what that means. I think it means they're gonna be switching all of their aircraft, getting rid of all the ones they're currently flying and flying ones they lease from SkyWest. That involves training, operational issues, which could, in the short term, exacerbate some of their operational
Reliability.
problems.
Mhm.
On paper, they look like everything we've looked for. We're gonna need to be comfortable with their answers to some of these questions that we believe that they're going to follow through on their promises versus some of their more recent issues that they've been having. I think we will get there, but I wouldn't want the board today to make a decision without going through that vetting, because if there were issues and we could have at least uncovered some of them by doing a proper vetting, we should have.
Right.
So, but we now run into issues with scheduling that is another problem, so.
Mhm. What is the date that we have to report back to the DOT then?
By midnight, the 11th.
So reliability and safety, it shows 21 is the graph they're showing. Then you get into the 2018 as mentioned.
Yep.
The curve doesn't go beyond, which is a little strange. You know, it's not like we have not had hiccups. So does the 8th work for everybody on noon? Is everybody back in town by then?
The eighth of,
April.
April.
But it probably would work for a majority.
if it works for the majority, don't stop it on my account,
No, that's 4 weeks out.
yeah. actually flying into Chicago on the 11th. But
You're out, Mike.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
Since Karen is still on the phone,
Eighth is a Monday, yeah.
would the 8th work for you?
Get 2 thumbs up.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, that's 4, so that's at least a quorum, and I believe Cindy and Tom are, I'm not sure they're back by then or not. So I mean, I think we have a good shot of having a quorum that day, so if the board so desires, we can forward that, and I can arrange the details of getting people scheduled and aligned to present.
It would be possible to maybe get me where I could listen in and not
Yep.
participate. Okay. Okay.
The only thing I've got at 3 o'clock on the 8th, I've got an EDC meeting, but I'm sure we'll be done within 3-hour timeframe.
Well, are we expecting 1-hour presentations from each provider?
We determine what it is. If we think that's too long, we can make that
I
half
would,
hour.
yeah, I would schedule them a half-hour presentation each, and then we can have a little discussion in regard to that, and
Maybe a lot 45 minutes between, which still puts us within that
yep,
timeframe.
yep.
Should we come up with questions and provide them to the carriers prior so that they are
Prepare.
hitting the ground running, addressing what's on our mind? I would hate for them to spend 15 to 30 minutes, and then we have another 30 minutes of questions.
I was planning on doing that, but if there are things the board specifically wants, so we've got a set of questions that we presented to the carriers either last time or the time before that. A lot focused on their customer service aspects, you know, what happens if you cancel a flight, how do you accommodate people, et cetera. I think with Contour, some of the things I raised, I'm planning on saying you need to be prepared to address these issues either in your presentation or in an answer. But if there are other things that people want, get that information to me, and I will make sure that the carriers get it before so that they're prepared to answer those questions.
Can you provide those questions to us when you provide them to the carrier?
Actually, I'll provide them to you before I send it to them so that you can comment and ensure that it's disagreement with what
Yeah.
I'm presenting to them.
Sounds good.
Sounds like a plan.
So do we set a time for the 8th?
3 o'clock is,
I'm
what time you're
I gotta
out?
be downtown
I
at 3.
think Jeff suggested noon,
Yeah,
so kind of a normal Monday
yeah.
timeframe.
Well, I might suggest something earlier than that.
Earlier, that's fine.
Because if they're gonna do a canned presentation, and there's 15 or 20 minutes of questions, now you're up at, you know, you're gonna leave here at 2:50.
Yeah.
Presumably, we're gonna vote
Yeah.
and make a
give it some time.
decision. So,
Let's go to 11.
well, let's go to 10.
Okay,
10, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Yeah, it's fine.
okay.
all right. 10 o'clock it is. All right, anything else? I think we've pretty well said what's been said here. Okay. All right, insurance time.
So, we've put things out for rebid. We've got a couple responses back. We're still waiting for 1 or 2 more. So this is not ready for board action yet. And I guess I will ask for a change in process, because when the board talked about this back in January, I was supposed to work with Mike, bring back a recommendation once we went through and got quotes, but if Mike is not going to be around between now and then, well, I guess you technically would be back 2 days
I would be,
before the
I would
next
be,
meeting.
I would be here in time for that, yeah.
I guess then we can, you and I can meet just before the next meeting and review what has all come in at that point.
Sure.
So that's my update there.
All right, good deal. and then the, Mead and Hunt projects. I think we kinda hit on that earlier, but
Right,
anything
so-
else to add?
Well, no,
Yeah.
there is. So again, just refreshing, so this was on the January, board agenda. At that time, the recommendation was that we wanted legal review because these are the first contracts we've had with our new, carrier. That finally came in the day after our February meeting. So George's, and so there are two contracts. One is the design contract for all of the projects that I talked about earlier. And the other one is just a general services contract for anything that we ask them to do that's outside the scope of these projects. George's feedback on the, design contract is, it's a standard state contract. It is basically essentially the same contract that we've been using with Brian Newhoff. He doesn't have any issues with it. So that is back on the agenda today, and I sent that to you as part of the packet for approval. There were a couple things, minor things, that he might like to see changed in the, general agreement. So I did not put that on the agenda today. I'd like to work with Mike and kind of work with Mike and then Mead and Hunt and kind of maybe negotiate on a couple of those. And then once that is done, bring that back to the board. The design contract is time critical because these projects are proceeding, and this is one of the pieces that's lacking to obviously do that. The general services, in all the years that I've been here, we've never utilized anything like that. We've never asked our consultants to do something outside of a project that they would bill us for.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no time criticality on that because I don't see necessarily anything coming up that we might need.
Okay,
Although, I say that, and then based on the transition committee, that is something that Mead and Hunt would have resources to help
Mhm.
us through that process.
Yeah.
And that would be outside of the scope of any capital project, so.
yep, he pulled
If
it.
that were to happen, this would be an agreement that would cover how that would get done.
Good deal, you pulled the question right out of my head.
Okay.
I'm glad that's available to us. Because we had talked about that once, a long time back, about, how they would fit into something like this, but just not a formal conversation, I just had a curiosity about it. All right. Anybody else? Anything? All right, new business.
Nope, we need a action to approve that agreement with Mead and Hunt.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I thought it was pending.
No, the design contract, which is included in your packet, or has reviewed, and that is fine.
The design project is okay, it's the general services that we still
Correct.
have to meet over.
Okay, so then the motion should read, the design contract with Mead and Hunt should be approved, and give is it the chair and the manager, or the manager the approval to sign?
In this case, the chair.
Chair, okay, so then that will be my motion. You good on that, Lindsay?
Yes, thank you.
Do we have a second for that?
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay. And that needs to be a roll call, I would think.
It does.
Mr. Egan,
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Downs,
Yes.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Adam Downs.
Yes.
So that's done. All right, and that takes us to new business now. I don't see anything written down, I don't have anything in the back of my mind. And public comment, no one's tuned in since, so,
I have a question.
yeah.
Should we, or do we, or have a representative from this board, I guess, maybe it's Jeff and,
Karen.
Karen, but any sort of formal presentation to the county board annually, biannually, quarterly, to make them aware of.
It's probably been a while, hasn't it?
It's been a while, yeah.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it since I've been on the board.
I do annual presentations to the city, they request that. Historically, the county hasn't, because they've got two, and by our bylaws are entitled to 3 on the board. That generally has provided that communication, but, I'd certainly be willing to, do that if either side wanted that.
Well, it's not a bad idea to do it when we, I would say, let's, get beyond this next EAS contract and reload and show some numbers.
Yep.
Give some updates. Might be, we change carriers, it'd be a good time to, have some public publicity
And
out of it as
So
well.
the only times I generally have gone before the county commission is when I'm asking for something. So it's better to be a little bit more known than always be the one that's coming asking for something.
Can we plan for maybe a June presentation? That way we can tell them.
I'll work with Lisa Sagala on figuring out what makes time for their schedule.
Right, anyone else? All right, well, I believe that adjourns us, and, we have a, the April 8th meeting coming up at 10 o'clock in the morning.
You know, I don't know way to wordsmith this, but, you mentioned something, Barry, in regard to Cape Air, like 78% capacity is peak capacity. That would be a question for all 3. What is peak capacity? Just because there's 9 seats or 30 seats,
Yeah,
is that actually,
I don't know.
I wanna know.
Yeah,
And I'll give an example as to why that makes a difference. So I was on vacation last week on a cruise, was flying back Sunday into here on American out of Fort Lauderdale. My American flight got delayed because of a mechanical issue, and the crew timed out, so it ended up being delayed for 20 hours, so it left the next day. So I obviously missed my connection on Cape Air that evening. Couldn't, so that was Sunday. So spent Sunday night in Fort Lauderdale. Monday, couldn't get into Manistee because both flights were sold out. A nice problem, but if you're trying to be reaccommodated, so ended up spending Monday night in Chicago, coming in then Tuesday morning.
yeah,
So when flights are at capacity and full, it presents challenges for people who, for whatever reason, get moved around and can't get reaccommodated.
right.
Now, we couldn't get into Traverse City either because there was only 1 seat available on American's flights into Traverse City, so.
Yeah. Yeah, on the other hand, Cindy had a great experience with Cape Air about a month ago. Holy cow. Similar situation, canceled flight, connecting flight from Tucson to Phoenix. And then the Phoenix flight into Chicago was a different flight. And her original plan, plenty of buffer, but she called ahead, contacted Cape Air and said, well, you know, if there's nothing, if it happens that, you know, the plane leaves, that's fine, but you just, out of politeness, letting them know that, well, here I am. And they said, all right, what flight are you on, et cetera, et cetera. Wheels no more touchdown, I forget what airline she was on, but Wheels no more touchdown, her phone started ringing, and it was the gate, the Cape Air gate, calling her up, saying, all right, we see your plane just landed, we're holding the plane for you, and here's exactly how to get here. Got all the way to the gate, and it was Agnes that met her there, and got her in there and said, all right, now, have you had time to go to the restroom? Talk about customer service. I mean, it was just like,
Don't rush.
just old-fashioned customer service.
That's good to hear.
And then I saw some of the guys, because, you know, there no special dispensation. Obviously, you couldn't get in, and I wasn't throwing any weight around or anything like that, just, you know, just here we are. Then I ran into the guy at, Mick's, kind of going away thing that he did last week. I didn't even know that's who I had on the phone. And, then all of a sudden we got to talking, I realized that's who it was. And, he said, you know, that's just who we are, we're customer service. And, you know, he is just proud of that job over there. Ron is the guy, that I was talking to. These characters around here, I tell you, I worked in a lot of schools and, you know, some businesses too, but I just, the pride these people have in what they do is just extraordinary.
You know, I think what I really key into is the word people.
That's
And,
it.
and you know, everybody's different and it's kind of the luck of the draw.
Mhm.
When I first came on the board, I said, I wanna fly Cape Air, so I took it down to Chicago.
Mhm.
And on my way back, Cape Air called me and said, can you come early? And I said, well, I really can't get there much earlier. And they said, well, we wanna close the gate at the ticket counter, because the people work in the ticket counter and they issue you paper tickets.
Mhm.
So I can't use this to get through security.
Right.
Because we wanna close the ticket counter and go down to the gate.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I'm in Chicago traffic. I can't physically get there any
Mhm.
quicker. Can you keep it open?
Mhm.
Well, you know, they did, but, you know, I had asked them 3 times, hey, you know, your paper ticket says the gate's gonna be open until
Mhm.
whatever time it was.
Sure.
You can't change that because I've scheduled my
Mhm.
ride to the airport based on you keeping the counter open.
Sure.
It's published.
Sure.
I think that's another, on the
Yeah.
list, 'cause that's a common issue amongst smaller carriers.
It is.
Mhm. Yeah.
That mobile, I mean, the problem would have been eliminated if you had an app and I had a mobile ticket
Mhm.
and I could go right to security, not monkey around with checking in on a paper ticket.
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of thing to ask about. I know that, when we've flown Cape Air, they generally make that same call. And I just asked, I don't think we've ever been asked to be there early. We've always been asked, what time are you gonna be there, so we can be sure we have someone there at the gate waiting on you. And I remember one time we were walking down, I forget what terminal they were in at that time, but passing by airline. And I think, they just noticed that we weren't looking at all the ones, we were just kind of walking along. And pretty soon we see somebody down at the gate, we just assumed must have been Cape Air. They started waving at us. And, you know, they didn't know us from Adam or, you know. No pun intended. But that was just crazy. And we waved back and we figured, well, okay, they must be waving at us, but I don't know. Yeah, good questions to ask, and I know nothing about these other carriers and, you know, what they have equipment-wise and, you know, what happens if something breaks, so forth. Well, anyway.
Yeah, are they starting with new employees here? Are they gonna be from the area? How many airplanes dedicated? Where's the maintenance?
Yeah.
Things like that. Breaks here.
Wasn't it Missouri?
How fast can they get another one here?
Contour is based in
In the,
Manistee.
yes, in the south, yeah. And I don't think they,
Just for the board, we've technically been served by them before. When Public Charters was providing service here, at that time, they were known as Corporate Flight Management, and they operated, Jetstream turboprops. They provided service here under that arrangement for probably 3, if not 4 years. So they know our airport.
They know the airport, right?
They've changed.
What years was it?
Roughly 8 years ago.
Oh.
So
Yeah, we
they've
flew-
changed a
we flew
lot.
around.
That they operate different equipment, they're a very different company. But the gentleman that I'm interacting with.
Still there?
Still there, yeah.
The difference between flying 135 and this public charter thing, what is that? scheduling, I know it's the 30-seat thing.
Well, that is
That's the
one of
only-
my questions, because
Yeah.
it's a small footnote in their proposal
Right.
that they're not operating as a scheduled airline, they're
Right.
operating as a Part 380 charter.
So
Mhm.
they can pretty
So-
much do what they want, when they want, or...
I mean, I know theoretically what that means, but I want them to explain it in terms that make you comfortable and make sure that it's what we're looking for.
Do they still have any of those old turboprops then?
I do not know.
You know, what is, today's the 18th. The questions that you're going to prepare and send to us, that we'll review.
I'll plan to do that by the end of this week,
Wonderful. So by Monday, the 25th, we can.
because Contour's already asking me, they wanna
Right.
schedule some time,
Okay,
so,
great.
yeah.
Thank
this-
you.
this- they're very interested
No, if you-
in making sure that they know what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
Cool. I think that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Mhm.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I was gonna hand out the updated airport authority list.
You sent that.
You sent that, we all got
Right,
that.
but it has a blank for.
Oh, for Lindsay.
Yes.
So, next month, there'll be another one that
Yep, we can
includes
get that updated.
that.
Okay.
So actually, if you could, I'm assuming it's probably the same phone number as your predecessors were, but
Yeah,
you could just put in
Yep.
contact information on that blank line.
sure.
Appreciate
From the
you,
bottom.
appreciate you coming on board with us.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right,
See you, Jeff.
adios.